Welcome to SRN Knowledge Center. Greetings to all my young learners. So, in this presentation, we will be continuing from the causes of the French Revolution, chapter number 1 of history. So, my dear young learners, in the last slide we had discussed that the causes of the French Revolution included the empty treasury of the France. Then the second which we discussed was the uh, discrimination in the French society. The third cause which we discussed in the last class was subsistence crisis. Another fourth cause for the French Revolution, for the outbreak of the French Revolution, was the inspiration from the philosophers, or you can say the role of the philosophers. So, in any revolution, philosophers, that is, the intellectual individuals, play a very greater role. Similarly, in the French Revolution, these intellectuals played such a greater role that the French society, the citizens of France, got so inspired to revolt against their king, who were not providing them any kind of powers, any kind of basic necessities, and there was a huge discrimination in the French society. Philosophers such as John Locke, he wrote one book with the name Two Treaties of the Government. And in this, he said that he did not believe in the saying of the monarch that they are the representatives of the king, they are the representatives of the Almighty, and they had absolute powers. They are over here to rule over the masses. He said that he refused to short the doctrine of the divine and absolute right. He believes that these monarchs are not the incarnation of the supreme power of the Almighty. The second philosopher was Rousseau. Rousseau gave an idea, and in his book Social Contract, he mentioned that there should be a government based on the relationship between the people and the government. What kind of relationship? That the people should elect their own government. The people should elect their own leaders who will ultimately run the entire country. Hence, the people should elect their representatives. So, this social relationship was being given by Rousseau in his book Social Contract. The third philosopher was Montesquieu, who in his book The Spirit of the Laws mentioned that the government elected by the people, the power of that government should be divided into three organs. One should be legislature, another one should be executive, and the third one should be judicial. The executive would be implementing the laws, legislature would be framing the laws, and the judiciary would be maintaining whether each organ is working as per the constitutional norms or not. This idea was being given by the third philosopher called as Montesquieu. So, my dear young learners, these middle class people included merchants, manufacturers, right, professionals such as lawyers, administrative officials. These were educated people and they believed that no group, no estate in the society should be privileged by birth. Everybody should be equal. So these middle class people were responsible to spread the ideas of the philosophers who were writing these ideas through their books, through their pamphlets, through newspapers. And these ideas of the philosophers were extensively discussed in saloons, in coffee houses, in chorayas, and these ideas were being spread among the people who were literate, and these literate people used to spread these ideas to the ones who are illiterate also, so that the public can be ready to revolt against their own king who was ruling despotically and was not providing any kind of basic right to the citizens of France. So, when the news that Louis XVI was planning to impose further taxes because the treasury of France was empty during that time, because France was assisting American 13 colonies against Britain. Because of that, the treasury of France was empty. And when Louis XVI was planning to impose further taxes, when this news got spread, the people, the masses got angered and there were protests against the system of privileges which were being enjoyed by the first and the second estate. So in France, the monarch didn't have the power to impose taxes by his own. He was thinking to levy more taxes on the third estate. The third estate were already paying tele and tithe as a taxes which were being imposed by the monarch and the church. And now this monarch was planning to impose more taxes. However, the monarch didn't have the power to impose taxes alone. So he needed to call a meeting of the parliament called as Estate General, right? So this was a parliament where the representatives from all the three estates used to sit, and he called the meeting of this Estate General on 5th May 1789. Right, in this meeting, 300 representatives from first estate, 300 representatives of the second estate, and 600 representatives of the third estate participated. There was a tradition in this estate general that every estate shall have one vote, but the third estate members demanded that every member should have one vote rather than estate having one vote. So, since this demand was against the tradition of the estate general, the monarch rejected this demand of the third estate. Hence, getting rejected their proposal, the third estate members walked out of the parliament called as Estate General on 5th May 1789. So, after moving out, these members of the third estate got assembled on 20th June 1789 at a tennis court at Versailles, and they took an oath that they will prepare one constitution for France, and that constitution would curtail the powers of the monarch. They also took an oath that this estate general from now on will be called as National Assembly, right? And they were being led by Mirabeau and Abesias. These were the individuals from the first and the second estate who were impressed by the ideals and by the proposals of the third estate, and they also believed that the society should be equal. Nobody should have the special privileges based on their birth. Now, when all these developments were taking place, the masses, the citizens were already facing a lot of problems, such as the bad harvest were there, the production were not too much because of the drought conditions. The salary of the wages of the workers were not increasing, and the inflation was rising. That means the prices of the essential commodities was keep on rising, but the wages were not increasing. Because of that, there were long queues outside the food shops, and there was anger which was growing among the masses. But the king, Louis XVI, who was unaware of these problems of the public, he ordered his troops to enter into the capital city of Paris. And on 14th July 1789, the agitated crowd stormed, destroyed, and attacked on the Bastille prison, which used to represent, symbolizes the despotic power of the Louis XVI. So now let us discuss something. We have already discussed about the causes, five causes, which were the first was the division of the French society. Then we have discussed empty treasury. Then we have discussed the role of the philosophers. Then subsistence crisis. Then the rejection of the demand of the third estate. Now the consequences of the French Revolution. The consequences was Louis XVI failed to suppress the revolt of the masses. Louis XVI recognized the National Assembly. He accepted the principle that from now on his powers would be checked by the Constitution. He also, on 4th of August 1789, the National Assembly abolished the, you can say, the privileges of the first and the second estate people, and the tithe, which was a tax levied by the church, was abolished, and the land which was holded by church was being confiscated, and through that the treasury received at least 2 billion livres, and through which the debt was paid off, right? So now in 1791 the constitution was ready. The National Assembly completed the draft of that constitution, and the main objective of the constitution was to limit the powers of the monarch. Now, in that constitution, the powers of the government were shared between legislature, executive, and judiciary, the idea which was proposed by Rousseau and Montesquieu. Hence, In 1791, France became a constitutional monarchy where the king was the head, but its powers were being checked by the elected representatives. Now, this National Assembly made some new laws and accordingly they divided the society into active citizens and the passive citizens. Who were these active citizens? These active citizens were the ones who had voting rights, who used to pay taxes. Who were the passive citizens? All those who didn't had voting rights. So who didn't had voting rights, who do not pay taxes. And these voting rights were limited only to the men who were aged about the age of 25 years and who used to pay the taxes equivalent to at least 3 days of a laborer's salary. Right? The passive citizens were the ones who didn't have the voting rights, example, women, children, youth under 25 years, as well as all those men who couldn't pay taxes equivalent to 3 days wages of a laborer. Right? Those were the passive citizens. My dear young learners, I believe that with this we have understood the importance of the French Revolution, the causes of the French Revolution. Also, we have tried to understand the consequences of the French Revolution and the 1791 Constitution of France, which declared France as a constitutional monarchy. Further topics of this chapter will be discussed in the further slides, in the further presentation. I hope you must have liked my explanation. If you, then please like, share, subscribe, and comment on the video. Thank you so much.